Asteroid of fear.
So I have like your general outline from Podmatch, and I'll probably kind of use that as a template, but the conversation can go wherever it needs to go. But usually I'll start off with like a little bit of your background and kind of what led you to this space and us meeting face to face. And I usually like to end it with kind of something that's been unexpectedly beneficial that's happened from, let's say, maybe the journey, writing the book, or whatever it is. So,
Okay,
all
that
right.
sounds quite great. I love your t-shirt.
Oh, thank
Every
you.
time I see Waffle House, I think of the fact that they never close, and if they do close, you're probably screwed.
Yes. You know that FEMA uses the Waffle House as a gauge for
Do they for
yep,
hurricanes and
yep,
stuff?
how bad a natural disaster is. But interesting, fun little fact is the Men of the House is named after the Waffle House. It's Men of the Waffle House, and it comes from me liking to go there and have breakfast on my own. And I'm sitting next to a stranger, other
Mm-hmm.
men. And it's kind of like, well, what's their story? What's their story? We're here alone. Our wives and kids are asleep, or maybe they're a widow, or maybe they're a truck driver. But it kind of came out of that curiosity of um, the stranger sitting next to you. What's their story? And
Right.
um, we're more alike than we are different, and yet we argue and fight over differences more than coming together over what's similar, because we all want love and to be loved.
We do.
And
Men especially are taught since birth to not show emotion, not to cry, not to that. So when I saw your podcast, I thought, oh, this would be fun.
yeah,
Most of
so
the people who talk about forgiveness are women. So I'm absolutely thrilled beyond words to be here so I can talk about it to men.
awesome. All right, well, and yeah, we'll get into it. All right, let me take a deep breath. I'll make a small introduction and we'll get into it, because I definitely think that spawned a thought that had some relevant information, but I'd rather save it for the discussion.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on today's episode, I have with me Katharine Giovanni, and we're going to talk about all things forgiveness. And as many of you know, um, on my journey after being laid off, I had to forgive the company that laid me off, as you would another human individual, and start to look at what did they give me? What did they teach me? And once I was able to kind of digest and that forgiveness, I was able to kind of move forward and realize that just like any relationship, sometimes they're for a season and they're there to give you some tools that you might utilize in your next destination or next endeavor. So, yeah, this I'm gonna enjoy this topic to say the least. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
How was that for leading into?
Perfect.
All
Perfect.
right.
You jumped right into forgiving objects and things, which most people don't do.
Yeah, it took me a little while to come to that. And, I can kind of I remember it vividly. I do Uber Eats and I was driving, listening to podcasts. This was prior to starting a podcast. And um, it just kind of clicked for me. And I was like, I need to do this, not for
Yep.
them, but for me. And once I was able to do that, and it's that kind of accepting a little bit of responsibility, a little bit of ownership, and understanding, hey, yes, it was a business decision, and, but you took it personal. And not everything has to be personal. I think it is in the beginning, but because it often feels like an attack or like something's wrong with us.
Mm-hmm.
But, we have to realize that not everything is meant for us. And when you look back, sometimes it's a blessing because I think we sometimes we won't leave the situation, even though we know we should.
That's true.
And so it sometimes takes that pain, that rock bottom, to get us to pivot and shift directions. But enough about me. Let's get in a little bit, give us a little bit about your background and kind of what led you to this space and um, your forgiveness journey, kind of, because I know there's got to be something in your background that touches this and caused you as an adult to kind of circle back around and go, this is a topic I need to tackle and dive deeper into. And not only that, but spread it with other people and get other people on board, because hopefully we're all aiming to have the best quality of life while we're here.
That's it. I was an angry kid. I had a dysfunctional family, as many people do, alcoholics. I probably should have known when they were giving scotch to the dog that probably wasn't a normal kind of thing.
Right.
And in the eighth grade, I was getting horribly bullied in school, really badly. My parents were getting a really ugly divorce, and I tried to commit suicide. So I turned into one of those kids. We all know these kids. And I had one or two friends, and I kind of just floated through life like a bobblehead for the next, for throughout my entire teenagehood. I was angry. I was really angry. I was like a walking thundercloud. And then a bunch of years later, maybe it was 1989, never mind what year it was, shall we?
Mhm.
My mother fell down a flight of stairs, broke her hip, ended up in the hospital. And God bless her, even my mother couldn't get a gin and tonic in the hospital. So she dried out. And we sent her to rehab. And once she dried out, I decided to tame my own demons, and I quit drinking myself. I've been sober 34 years. So
Right.
we became really, really tight, like really tight. Like, and then 3 years later, she died. And I knew that if I didn't do something to lose the anger, I was going to die just like she did. So the thing about forgiveness, we're all taught to forgive, right? We're all said,
Mhm.
you have to forgive. And these magical unicorn people can also forget. I haven't managed that, and I wrote the book on it. But there's probably a unicorn out there that can forget what happened to them. I am not that person. And so, but nobody teaches us how to forgive. Now, you stumbled across it by accident,
Yeah.
but nobody teaches us how to forgive. And that's the main reason I started. Now, I'm a concierge trainer by trade. I retired from it a bunch of years ago. But back in the early 1990s, I can't teach you how to be warm, friendly, and approachable and offer unbelievable customer service if you're angry inside, because your anger is going to bleed through your body language, whether you want it to or not, unless you can act like George Clooney.
Right.
It's going to bleed through. People are going to notice. So I had to come up with a method of forgiveness that I could teach at my workshops, but you didn't bring a soft topic to workshops back in those days. It wasn't done unless you're crazy like me. So I
Right.
did. And that's kind of what started the journey. Now, everybody listening to this broadcast, every single one of them, 10 out of 10 people, when you see the word forgiveness, you're thinking of, on a 10 scale, with 10 being unforgivable dumpster fire, you're thinking of your number 10, every single one of you. And you don't want to forgive that person. And that's completely fair. And in my world, you don't have to. Stay
Hmm.
with me. Stay with me. Because on that 10 scale, there's other people, places, and things, and I did say places and things, that you can forgive before you even get to the dumpster fire. How about the number ones? How about that kid who tripped you in the hall in grammar school? How about the guy who stole your lunch yesterday at the office? You could forgive that person. How about the guy who took your parking spot? You could forgive that person. There's a lot of other things you can forgive before you even get to that dumpster fire.
So it's almost like a practice, slight inoculation, ease into it
Yeah.
type of a thing.
Well, the thing the thing about it is, that number 10, unforgivable, there's a few facts that, and I have a whole science chapter on this that I can throw at people. I have science to back up what I'm saying. But forgiveness is personal. It's selfish. You do it for you.
Right.
Here's my definition of forgiveness. I want you out of my head. Period. I want to stop talking about you. I want to stop thinking about you. And I want the memory to go away. I don't want to think about it anymore. And the real problem that a lot of women have problems with this one is the person you're mad at isn't even thinking about you. They're just living their life, doing whatever they want to do. That bothers a lot of women. Men, not so much. Men are more able to just say, well, that kind of thing. But, they're not thinking about you. So forgiveness is selfish. That's number one. Number two, it doesn't mean they were right. I'm not condoning what you did. You're still wrong. All I'm doing is I want you out of my head. When I see your name on Facebook or I run into you at Thanksgiving's coming up, you're going to have to sit next to Aunt Martha. Aunt Martha you're always sitting next to her. You know exactly what she's going to say when you're at that table. Okay, well, you got to forgive Aunt Martha. But it doesn't mean that she was right. It just means that I want to get you out of my head. I want to stop thinking about you. Forgiveness is selfish. And just because I forgive you doesn't mean I want a relationship with you. I probably don't. And that's fine. In recovery, they want you to make amends. There's,
Right.
especially in AA, there's a step, fourth step, and you have to make amends. You got to call these people. I have no interest in calling people. Absolutely none. So in my world, using my method, forgiveness is something you can do in the privacy of your own home. You don't have to call anybody. You don't have to tell anybody. All you have to do is forgive for you. It's 100% for you. It's never for them.
So, yeah, like what I find interesting is I think we all have that picture in our mind of kind of what you're talking about. Like, I want this person out of my mind. I want
Sure.
this thing to stop plaguing me. But in reality, for most of us, that's, let's say, our dumpster fire. Those less dumpster fires where we still have to share space with that
Right.
person, place, or thing. How does that differ in your approach? Because, like, let's say I still live in the same town, I still drive by the facility, I still work out at the facility that I used to manage, the clinic that has a gym that I used to manage, I still go there. And so, or let's say you have somebody who's wronged you, but they're in your inner circle and you're going to forgive them for you, but you're still sharing that space, and maybe it can be like a co-working situation. How do you approach that with reconciling, I want you out of my mind, to I'm not going to react when I see you on Facebook or I sit next to you at Thanksgiving? How do you approach that?
Well, first of all, if they're a number 10, in the book, and I've got worksheets in the book and all that kind of stuff, but I'm going to have you write a list of all the people, places, and things, and I'll explain that in a second, of who you think you want to forgive. And then I want you to rate them from 1 to 10. You're not going to get a number 10 person down to a 1 in one sitting. It's going to take some passes. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Now, if you're number 10, let's give an extreme example. Let's say you were bullied in school. And every day, to use your own example, you drive by that grammar school and you sit at the red light, and every once in a while you take a sip of coffee while you're waiting for it to turn green, and you turn your head to the left and you see the playground, and in a minute you're back in 6th grade with the bullies.
Right.
So what you want to do is, maybe you're not ready to forgive the bullies. Maybe they're a number 8, a number 9 on your scale. So you forgive other parts of the memory. You forgive the playground. You forgive the building. You forgive the other kids who stood around and didn't do anything. Now, how do you really get them? Here's a special sauce that everybody forgets. You forgive the energy. You forgive the energy around the building. You forgive the energy around the people. You forgive the energy around the memory. Einstein did prove that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just transforms into something else. So when
Right.
you get angry, everybody on the planet thinks it goes out of my mouth and it dissipates into the clouds and goes away. It does not. It hangs in your energy field until you clear it, until you purposely clear it. Let me give you a visual. For anybody listening, I'm about to hold an opaque cup in front of my face. So let's say this cup is anger. And when I'm first angry, I can hold it off to the side. I'm managing my life. I'm going to work. I'm going out to dinner. I'm doing homework with the kids, whatever you want to do. Easy. But the longer I hold on to this energy, the longer the anger energy stays, eventually I'm going to need both hands to hold it up. Now look at my body language. I can still conduct my life, but it's starting to interfere with my life. Now, if I really hold on to it, now look at my body language. I'm stuck. I can't see you. I can't see my job. I'm talking about it. I'm thinking about it. Nobody wants to be near me because it's all I can talk about. So my friend circle is starting to go down and I'm starting to turn into a little bit of a loner because all I can think about is the anger within the glass. So to put down the glass, you pick out part of that memory and you pick out, like, you forgive the building, the chair, the table, the bed, the town. I forgave 1974. And why did I forgive 1974 and the energy around the entire year? I did pick out the people in that year, but I also forgave the year itself. Why? Because that's the year I tried to commit suicide. And after I forgave everything, I thought, well, I'm just going to forgive the whole year. I forgave my childhood grammar school. I forgave the energy around the school. And eventually, after a couple sessions, I was able to forgive the bullies within that school too. It took a minute.
So it's like the opposite of forgiveness seems to be anger naturally. And
And resentment.
yeah.
Mhm.
And where do you think that comes from? I mean, because, I guess it's not something, I don't know. Is it something we all have, or is it something we're taught or we see in the environment? Like, is it something as kids that we pick up on, or is it like a natural, just like a bodily function?
It's a natural thing. Everybody is so scared of the negative emotions and they want, you want to run away from anger. Anger is bad, these types of things. But in my world, what I try and tell people is I want you to dive right into it. I want you to face it in a healthy way. I want you to take that number 10 memory and take that person. And maybe it's not even appropriate to forgive that dumpster fire person. It may not
Right.
be. And that's fine. Pick out other parts of the memory. See, human beings are going to irritate other human beings.
Yeah.
This is just part of the human experience. It's what you do with that anger. It's how you process it. I'm a cancer survivor, so I can't control the fact that I got cancer. I can't control a lot of this stuff that, life throws at you, but I can control how I get through it and I can control what I do with it once I have it. And that's the same thing with anger. I think getting angry, I tell everybody, take 24 hours and just get angry. Eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Go pound to pound. I don't care what you do. You have 24 hours to be really angry. And then I want you to dust yourself off and start the process of forgiveness. And you put that number 10 on your list and you go to the number ones and you start forgiving with them. Now, circle back to Aunt Martha. You're going to have dinner with her. Your parents put you next to Aunt Martha every year, even though you tell them every year, please don't put me next to her. I know what she's going to say. And she does. So before you even get there, you're going to forgive Aunt Martha. You're going to forgive the energy around Aunt Martha. You're going to forgive yourself for anything you may or may not have done, the energy around yourself and the energy around the whole thing. And then after you do that tiny little mantra, I want you to check in with your body. Are you still angry? Is she still a 10 or is it maybe a 9 at this point? So by the time you get to dinner, she's still going to be there. She's still going to be spewing out whatever she spews out, but it's not going to bother you. I'm not looking for you to forget. That's impossible. I'm
Right.
looking for neutrality. I'm looking for you to not care. I'm looking for you to look at their name on Facebook and there's no emotional reaction inside your brain. That's what I want. and you're sitting next to Aunt Martha, you know what she's going to say, so you laugh about it. It doesn't bother you. It's like water off a duck's back. Now, you might have to go out to your car again and say, I forgive her, I forgive her, I forgive her, I forgive her, I forgive her. But it's not going to bother you as much because it won't.
When you came across this, so you said your mother went to rehab, you decided
Mhm.
you would stop drinking,
Uh-huh.
and were at that point in your life and starting your sobriety journey, were you doing any of the steps AA? Where did you come across this? Because I remember you distinctly saying like you knew you had to forgive or get rid
Mhm.
of the anger,
I
which
did.
we said, hey, that's the opposite of. Where did it come from? And, were you involved in any prayer? Was it something that you just felt and knew? And then how did you kind of start to break into and explore and kind of break it down the steps?
I'm really intuitive, and I have
Mhm.
been since I was a little girl. And I used to talk to myself in my head and imagine my surprise when I discovered that I was the only one doing that, which is why I kept quiet about it my entire life because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be like
Right.
everybody else. I didn't want to be stuffed into a locker. So I kept quiet for 40 years, but I've got this little bird on my shoulder. I wrote a book about it. And it's a question of trusting that intuition, trusting that soft voice that you hear. Men call it their gut, women call it their intuition. And my gut was screaming at me to forgive and take this path. And I have found in my life that when I trust that little bird on my shoulder, it usually goes really well. And when I don't trust it, everything tends to go a little wonky. The little bird on my shoulder has saved my life 3 times. Not that I'm counting particularly,
Hmm.
but in 2011, I'm pretty allergic to exercise, I'm sad to say. And in 2011, I started to feel like I needed to take up running. Everybody laughed at me, but I couldn't get it out of my head. You need to run, you need to run, you need to run. And after a while, just to shut it up, I tried the Couch to 5K running program and it worked brilliantly. And I ran a 5K. Okay, I walked and ran it. It was kind of a hybrid thing,
That's
but I
okay.
did it. And I knew the weight was coming off too quick. I did. And I went from a 14, 16 down to an 8. When I got to the 8, I found a lump. It was stage 3 breast cancer. And the surgeon said if I hadn't taken up running, I would be dead because it was in a very strange spot. So when that little bird sings to you, I have learned over the years to listen to it. And that's kind of how it played out. When I got sober, I finally came out of that fog and I was able to hear very quite clearly the path I needed to take. The question
So
is to listen to it and not talk back. Well, there you
yeah.
go.
So it was kind of like, hey, you started on this journey, and then kind of when
Yep.
you got into the concierge kind of service, you had already kind of been practicing this, and this was at your forefront. And then it
Mhm.
was kind of like a, hey, because especially, I guess, in what concierge services, you're going to have people, you can't control other people's moods, how they're coming to you. Um, and
Well, remember, it was at the beginning of that industry. You're going back to like 1998, and the concierge industry was in the hotel industry, but it wasn't
right.
in mainstream America. It didn't exist. And I felt that I needed to write a book about it. So I wrote a book about it, and everything just kind of played out from there. And the industry is now booming, worldwide.
Yeah.
But am I a particularly smart human being that I identified that this was something I could do? No, I'm a good listener. I trust my intuition and I've gotten really good at listening to it. And losing the anger, it allows you to become the person you came here to the planet to be. It's very hard to live an authentic life if you're angry and you're resenting. Now, is it really a normal thing for a 63, there we go, 63-year-old woman to be sitting in her chair upset about something that happened in the 1970s? That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Why am I sitting obsessing about something that happened decades ago? Yeah, there was. And once I relieved all of that pain, I can look back at my childhood and I can pick out the pockets of love. I can pick out little pockets of happiness that I have. It's not that I've forgotten everything that happened back there. It's just that it's been neutralized. And for anybody listening, I know you don't want to go back to your childhood. It was painful. I'm asking you to go back one more time to clear it once and for all so you can become the person you were always meant to be.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of is, when at the beginning when I was talking about, hey, we're all much more common than we are different,
That's right.
just like when you're sitting next to Aunt Martha, and I can think of myself as a leader in healthcare, and
So glad you're tuned in. Did you know that this podcast, as well as my own, are part of a much larger world called the Podcast Connection Network? We have some pretty amazing shows hosted by even more amazing souls just waiting to be discovered. Curious? Head over to the link in the description below. You won't be disappointed. Curious? Head over to the link in the description below. You won't be disappointed.
or working in kitchens, I mean, things go wrong, things
They do.
happen,
They
and
do.
sometimes it's because one person within the team missed a step. Maybe it was intentional, maybe it was not, maybe it was just an honest mistake. And I think, that forgiveness, what kind of always stuck out to me was, forgiveness has to be important, especially in a team dynamic, because um, we're all working towards the same goal. And I think
We
if
are.
you can kind of align that and kind of go like, it's similar with that commonality, is the minute something goes wrong and it's somebody else's fault or something, it's like blame, 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 blame. But it's like, look, that it's not going to change anything. So what we need to do is remember we still have one goal, whether it's to save a patient's life or give this person the best service possible. So we need to get back to focusing on that, because I mean, at the end of the day, whatever happened. We can't change it. And so I think it's that, understanding that ability to pivot. And I think what's frustrating to me on a personal level is that I found that in professional situations, especially like having come from the kitchen, emergency rooms, the military, these fast-paced environments, you almost are more quickly to forgive, pivot, and move on because the situation and the role requires it. And where I get frustrated is when it's more on a personal level and not in an occupational sense, we seem to get stuck and we stew.
Yep.
And sometimes we can forget for a little bit and
For a little
then
bit, then it comes back.
something comes back. Cause I mean, I have a situation for me that, I feel like I've forgiven, but
And you probably have.
and it's more than 2 years old, but like it still came up kind of the other day, like briefly, but it didn't bother me as much. But still, it's like ugh, like when you think about it, and it's kind of like I'm stepping. Maybe I've got that 10 down to a 5.
Well, if you've got it down to a 5, you could probably get it down to a 3 or a 4 if you forgive the energy around the memory
Oh,
and you forgive the energy around the person. That's probably going to shift it really nicely for you.
I need that.
And then you can pick out other parts of the memory. If it's still kind of sticking in your craw, and let's say it was a kitchen, okay, forgive the other people in the kitchen, forgive the mixer, forgive the stove. And I'm actually not kidding, forgive the building. Pick away at the memory. You see, a lot of these, with all due respect to every speaker and motivational speaker and coach out there, but a lot of them will say you hit a brick wall and here are some tools to get through the brick wall. Okay. How about you pull out a few of the bricks, walk around the brick wall and keep going and circle back later if you can. That's what I'm talking about. You don't necessarily have to forgive that number 10 person. You may not even be able to, but you can pick out pieces of the memory. You can forgive yourself. Hello. Forgiving yourself is huge, and you might be your own number 10 Forgive yourself and then circle back later. If you can't circle back, don't worry about it. If somebody says you have to forget, don't worry about it, because I can't. So that's very hard to do. If you've got a family member who says, I don't know what you're talking about, that person is so nice and I have a great memory. Okay. With all due respect to your family member, I don't care. I don't care what their memory is. I care about you. And if you have the bad memory, then that's what we're going to work on.
Is there anything that's unforgivable? And how would
Oh yeah,
you,
I'm sure there is.
and
There's a lot of unforgivable
well,
things.
how would someone forgive the unforgivable if it's possible? Because I know, like, if we look at both sides of the spectrums, you're like, there's people who are like, I could never, but then like I'm a huge like true crime fan,
Yep.
investigation, discovery, and oftentimes, every once in a while you will see like um victims from victim impact statements or whatever that can forgive,
Those are
maybe like
unicorns.
a murderer or
Yeah.
something.
I
And
call those
whether,
unicorn people.
yeah, it's, I mean, so what separates? How do you forgive the unforgivable? Or is it a matter of defining to yourself that you think it's unforgivable? Because, I have this thing, like, let's say I'm a podcaster, and I can remember my mother one time saying, well, I don't think the job you want is out there. And I said, with the
Oof.
way you want it. And I go, well, if you think it's not, then it's definitely not. And
Yeah.
so by
That punch.
definition, by definition, with forgiveness and unforgivable, do you think that's similar? And that if you define it as unforgivable, then that makes it unforgivable? Or what are your solutions to forgiving the unforgivable if it's possible?
I have two solutions.
Hmm.
One, I am not a particularly religious person, but there is one passage in the Bible that got me to forgive my parents. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. And he was nailed up in the cross, bleeding and probably in a lot of pain. And what did Jesus mean when he said that? In my opinion, he meant if I'm talking to a 5-year-old and they don't know calculus, I can't get mad at that 5-year-old because they don't know calculus. They haven't learned it yet. So my parents did the best they could with the tools they had at the time. Was it good enough? No, of course not. But they did the best they could. And through some Simone Biles mental gymnastics in my head, I was able to forgive my parents. Now, what about an unforgivable thing? Well, I'll go back to picking apart the memory. Um, you're not going to get that number 10 down to a 1 in one sitting. This is going to take a minute. This is a marathon and it's a personal journey. And once you get over the fact that you're doing it because you want to be free, it becomes a little bit easier. I'm not saying they were right. They're still wrong. They're still evil. It's still foul. But I want to be released from the memory. I want freedom. I don't want to think about it anymore. So you pick apart other parts of the memory. If you can't do that, then start with, I forgive myself for not being able to forgive. And I forgive the energy around this thought. Start there. That's going to start moving the energy a little bit. And that's what you want. You want just to move that needle on the dial just a tiny little bit. And then maybe if it's a courtroom procedure, maybe you can forgive the desk, the table, the judge, the jury. You can forgive yourself for wearing a black suit instead of a brown one. You can forgive other things within the memory. And you can slowly pick it apart. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It might take weeks, months, years, but you could slowly pick it apart until eventually you may or may not be able to forgive that person. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, if you can't forgive that person, I think you're fine. If you pick apart as much as you can, forgive what you can and move forward.
What about, I want to explore kind of the importance of self-forgiveness, because I don't know if I think, do you think that maybe a lack of being able to forgive someone else or something else is really um a lack of self-forgiveness because you're just so
It
mad
depends
at
on the
yourself?
topic. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to forgive yourself for anything you may or may not have done. And I think forgiving yourself is incredibly important. And I think you should do the same steps that I'm outlining in the book for you, for other people. You do your 10 scale for you, except instead of people, you're probably going to do people maybe that you have hurt and memories that you want to get out. And you would do the same process, except it would be memories and people, right? But I think that anger is toxic, and I
Mhm.
could prove it. I said there is science in the book. There is a researcher, and I can't pronounce his name to save my soul, but I will give it a shot. I think his name is Masumoto. It's right on Google, really easy to find. He was a Japanese researcher
Yep.
that studied water. Now I'm going to dumb this down really, really far, and in the interest of time. 2 containers of water. 1 container, he said beautiful words to, preached love at it, said nice things, treated it well. The other container of water, he spewed hatred, nasty, treated it really poorly. Then he put it under a microscope. The water he treated and said nasty things to had these black and brown formations, and they were really nasty. And the water he spoke love to had these beautiful white and gorgeous crystalline formations. Now, why am I telling you this? Because your body is mostly 98% water, give or take a percent. So when you're spewing hatred and self-talk that's negative and you're angry, what do you think's happening to the water molecules inside your body?
Polluted.
And what do you think it's doing to the organs within your body? So when you're forgiving people, you're forgiving yourself, and you're starting with your number ones and you're moving all the way to your 10s, but you're starting with the easy ones. You're actually changing the molecules within your body, and you're going to start to feel better. You're going to start to notice things. Why? Because you're not looking through the haze anymore. You might notice a really good weight loss opportunity. Why didn't you see it before? Because you were too focused on your anger. You might see another job opportunity. Your dream spouse might just walk into the room. It's because you're paying attention. You're noticing things more. You're feeling better. Even with the 1s, 2s, and 3s, and people will come up to you and say, "Did you get a new haircut? Something's different." Well, yeah, you're different because your energy is different. Now, on the other side, if you're living with people that are kind of negative, they're going to notice it too, and they're probably going to try and pop your bubble. They're going to try and bring you back down again because your energy is changing. They want that negative
Yeah.
person back. So stay the course.
Or they want what they're used to.
They want what they're used to, and they're going to try and sabotage it, but don't let them.
Familiarity, because it's, I think your changing is uncomfortable for them.
Scary.
But
Change is scary.
it makes me think, and it sounds kind of cliche in a way, but kind of the truth of looking within, starting
Yep.
with self.
Mm-hmm.
Forgive yourself, even if it's for, hey, I forgive myself for being a dumbass and
There you go.
even pursuing this opportunity or thinking this would work, or what I call it is kind of like, I forgive myself for having a lapse in judgment.
There you go. And the energy around that. Now, a little word, a little PSA I have to give everybody. When my friends and I came up with this method, I'm an overachiever, shocker. And I came up with this list of like 40, 50 people and places and things. And I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it all at once. It's going to be like a Band-Aid ripping off. I'm going to be a new person tomorrow morning. And I did it all before I went to bed, because your body heals itself when it's sleeping. So everybody should do their forgiveness work before they go to sleep at night, please. And it didn't exactly work out the way I wanted it to, because I spent the next 3 days in bed with what everybody thought was a stomach flu, because my body needed time to change and get rid of all the anger to be polite. So I really want you to limit yourself to like 10 to 12 people, places, and thing a night. And I think that when most people, when they do this work, get tired, how do you know that you've done it? Well, one of my sons says his shoulders feels lighter, and he always says it feels very strange, but it does. I feel a pressure within the middle in my solar plexus, which is like at the top of your stomach.
Mhm.
And everybody's different. Most people just get really tired. So pay attention when you're forgiving those 1s, 2s, and 3s. Pay attention to your body to see if there's a sign. Now, how do you really know? You'll go on Facebook, see that person's name, and you won't care. Boom, you're done. That's what I'm looking for. But try and limit yourself. Now, there are some people who might be politely put in the bathroom for a while. You did not eat a piece of bad fish. It is not
Right.
food poisoning. Your body is just clearing itself. So just let
Stress.
it happen and drink a lot of water.
What's the since kind of like forgiveness and anger, there seems to be this root. What's the first thing you do when somebody like just irritates the piss out of you?
Me personally,
Yeah,
I
if
usually
right now somebody cut you off, took your parking spot, and you were like, what's the first thing?
usually in my head, I'm going, and I say some blue words. I'm originally from New York City, and I live with an Italian who's originally from Hoboken, who uses,
Yeah.
adjectives that would probably turn your hair white, because that's what they do.
Is
So I might say a few blue words in my head, but usually I'm able to kind of focus, and I'll go out, I'll either leave the room or I'll go out to my car, and I have been known to just sit there and go, I forgive them. I forgive them. I forgive them. I don't mean a word of it, but I'm just, it's lip service. And I'm just saying, I forgive, I forgive. And that's when that night I'll go home and I will forgive the process. And I'll say, okay, that was a 10, and I'll start the process.
And when, we were talking about like, because one of the questions is kind of like, how do you know when it's working? And you described some of the feelings and feeling lighter and whatnot.
Yep.
When was the first time you actually felt that and you could remember and you felt you were onto something and that kind of pushed you?
This is going to stretch your brain just a little bit, but I promise it won't hurt too much.
I love stretching it.
When I first forgave, I started with my number one. I do drink my own Kool-Aid, so I did my own process.
Mhm.
And that's a horrible example. I shouldn't say it that way. That's a horrible example. No, but I do practice what I preach. That's probably better, right? And I picked a person that I went to high school with, and I couldn't remember what the fight was even about. And I thought, this is an easy one. I could easily forgive this person, because I couldn't even remember what the fight was about. I hadn't talked to this person in over 35 years. So I sat down, and in my world, it's just a simple little mantra. You don't have to dance. You don't have to burn anything. You don't have to get out any crystals, unless, of course, you want to, in which case, knock yourself out. But it's just a real simple little mantra. So I said my mantra, put my hand over my heart, and I really meant it, because I really meant it. It was from the 70s. 2 hours later, she calls me up on the phone. I hadn't heard from this person in 35 years. This is a true story. And I almost fell out of my chair. And, but we made the appropriate words and the appropriate noises, and we made friends again, and we reminisced, and we did all the stuff that you do. And then, because I'm a curious little bear, I had to know. I said, I have to know. After all these years, why did you choose to call me today? And she said, what was the damnedest thing? 2 hours ago, which was exactly when I was saying my mantra, a figurine you gave me in school fell off my shelf, and I landed in the middle of my floor, and I thought I should give you a call.
Wow.
We were 700 miles away. So if forgiveness energy has the power to move a figurine 700 miles away, and it has the power to shift my shoulders, make me feel lighter, shift the energy in my body, can you imagine what it would do to a level 5 or somebody in the higher numbers? Can you imagine
Yeah.
what that would do to your life? This is serious science, and it's like the law of gravity. The law of gravity is going to work whether you believe it or
Or
not. You
not.
can call it anything you want. You can call it the law of keeping Richard on the ground.
Yep.
That's fine. It doesn't care. Okay, Richard, well, I don't believe in the law of gravity. Doesn't care. It's still going to work. It really
Yep.
doesn't care. This is the same thing. It's
Yeah,
going to
because
work.
it's like
It's going to work.
Energy is, just because we
It's
can't
energy.
see frequencies doesn't mean they're not existing around us.
Exactly.
And I have this thing of going like, I worked in hospitals and measure the energy there, because I know you
Right.
can measure it, and then measure the energy at a concert where everybody's in unison to see the same band and rocking out. And there is a viable difference. And,
100% there is.
you know,
100%.
And
Frequency is
so,
everything, the music you listen to, but people have an energy about them. And the reason people don't stay, now people come to me all the time, said, well, Catherine, I did forgive them. Yeah, you did. 100% you forgave them, but they didn't stay forgiven and they're still in your head. And you're all thinking about this person as you're listening to me say this. You know who I'm talking about because you didn't forgive the energy around the person, the situation, and yourself. You didn't forgive the energy. That's why they didn't stay forgiven. The energy is still kind of hanging around.
so a couple of things. As we start wrapping it up, well, one is going to be give us the name of the book, where you can get it. But then also, I want to know from embarking on this journey, writing this book, some of these things as the concierge service, if you have a few examples of things that have happened that have just been, great to you and filled your cup that would have never otherwise happened had you not decided to embark on the journey of forgiveness.
A great question. Well, first, to take your first question first, the
Mhm.
book is called The Ultimate Path to Forgiveness, Unlocking Your Power. I do understand not everybody likes to read, so the audiobook, the paperback, and the ebook are all available on Amazon. You can
Okay.
also find me at katharinegiovanni.com. And Catherine, thanks to my mother, is spelled a little bit strangely. Thanks, Mom. Katharine Giovanni.com. I think for me, the thing that's been the most brilliant about this whole thing is I legitimately do come from a kind of a rough background. And I can look back at my childhood and I can see the love of there. I'm not angry anymore. I have horrible posture. And I used to walk around like I'm the letter C. Seriously, I'm not kidding. And now I'm actually standing up straighter. My posture, while it will never be perfect, is better than it was. I feel lighter and I feel like a different person than I was. And I look at these pictures of from me from 20 years ago, and it feels like a different person. It almost feels like a stranger. And I want to talk to her and say, it's okay. You're going to be fine. But if you can just take what I'm saying and just forgive the easy ones, even if you don't believe me, forget the dumpster fire. Seriously, forget the dumpster fire. Start with the easy ones. And I think you're going to be really, really, really happy about how much better you feel just forgiving the person who cut you off in aisle 5 of the grocery store.
I got a question. You mentioned you had children and the
I
way
do?
that they feel. So, do you have grandchildren?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Although
Well,
I am yamming at them to provide some.
well, and so what I wanted to ask was, how was it teaching these methods and techniques to your children? And do you think the way you've taught them will impact how they teach? Because we started off this conversation of everybody tells you to forgive, but nobody ever tells you how, especially as a child. And so, how did that kind of impact? And do you think your children are gonna kind of carry that forward with their kids?
One of my sons is a federal law enforcement officer. And teaching him about forgiveness has been especially gratifying because his knee-jerk reaction is not to shoot first and then talk. His knee-jerk reaction is to talk and then do what he has to do. And just that in itself. And both my sons have come back and thanked me because they're not as angry as other kids. They're not as angry as other men out there. And they seem to have a pretty healthy dynamic of forgiveness and anger. And especially the cop. I mean, he deals with
The
he's a
worst of
cop.
the worst,
I
probably.
mean, he deals with the worst of the worst, but he's learned to manage it and he's learned to forgive and he's learned all of these kind of fixes.
And he gets to see um the results of the people who never let that anger go and where it gets them.
Yeah. Well, I'm a
Um,
pacifist. I didn't even let them have water guns as kids, but I'm not sure how a pacifist gave birth to a cop, but I did. And his knee-jerk reaction really isn't to shoot. His knee-jerk reaction is to talk. And they send him in because he's learned how to talk. And he's talked a few suicides off the ledge, as my younger son has as well. My younger son was in the TV industry for a while, and he talked to a couple people and talked them off the ledge. So I think, as
Man.
my grandpa used to say, I think I did swell.
Yeah, well,
I
like
did
you said,
good.
you don't know how it happens, but I found through interviewing and listening to podcasts and whatnot, and as I explore people to come on and stories and
Mhm.
lessons, it seems like regardless of how good or how bad our childhoods were, or how prominent or not prominent our families were, that we all get smashed up somehow.
We do.
And
Life
none-
throws us around, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. And none of us come out unscathed. We all get
Nope.
the same ending. And that's, to me, that kind of utopian type of thing of, hey, we're in this together. Let's do it together and help each
And
other
we're
out.
not meant to be miserable and poor
Yeah,
and living in the street. We're not meant to be like that. We're meant to be happy. We're meant to be prosperous. You're
and
on the
connected.
planet for a reason. And if
Yeah.
you don't know what your reason is, start losing some of the anger and resentment, and the path will become clear, because that fog that you've been walking around in is going to clear, and you're going to start to notice things.
And that's
Try
that
it out.
whole
Even if you don't believe me, give it a shot. You have nothing to lose.
start with self and find your purpose. And
Yeah.
that's what led me to podcasting was, I was lost. I needed something to do. And once it clicked for me and I forgave, and then everything started falling into place, and it was like, oh, well, guess what? 6 years of interviewing people for nursing positions paid off in interviewing skills for a
It did.
podcast, so it's like, hey, rounding on people, helping people set goals, because I have a accountability group, and so yeah, it's all worked out. And once I think you see what it gives you, it's definitely a lot easier to appreciate. But kind of like you said, it's a constant work in progress, and will always continue to be, because different things in the world will aggravate us. That's one guarantee. So it's
You
kind of
know,
like a skill that we have to practice.
back in the 1970s and 1980s, and even in the early 90s, I really am that old. They used to look at you and say, if you're going into a job interview, you're not supposed to say, I'm good with people.
Right.
Okay. Yes and no, to be honest, because it's a skill that not everybody has. You clearly have it. So to say I'm really good with people, that's a skill, and that's exactly what you should be saying. So whatever you learned as a kid, take it with a grain of salt. Our society has a tendency to look through the lens of a 1950s, demographic and corporate world. So trust your gut, trust that intuition, and I think it's going to lead you to good places.
Awesome. Well, it's been great talking to you. I've learned a lot. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And um, do you have any questions for me before we hop off?
Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, this will be, what is today, Friday? So this will come out next Saturday.
Perfect.
So the 12th, 13th, 14th. Oh, my mom's birthday.
Happy
Awesome.
birthday.
Well, thank you. And go out, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And to all the listeners, try to go out and be the person that you would want to meet, and start with some forgiveness and start with yourself. All right. Till next time. All righty. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Hey, go. Asteroid of fear.